Who was Homer Plessy? He was a 30-year-old shoemaker from New Orleans who is famous for his case that challenged segregation in public transportation. But who was he? He was born Homer Patrice Adolphe Plessy in March 1863, a few months after the Emancipation Proclamation. His stepfather was a member of the Unification Movement in New Orleans, which formed in 1870s to seek political equality for all and end discrimination. He became an active participant in 1887 when he became the vice president of the Justice, Protective, Education, and Social Club. This group challenged segregation in New Orleans public parish schools. Segregation in education was against the law under the Louisiana state constitution. Their challenge was unsuccessful. Many white children attended the over 200 private schools in the area, leaving the black students underfunded and many dropped out. They chose to fight the system under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Homer Plessy was a member of the Comte des Citoyens, a group of civil libertarians, ex-Union soldiers, Republicans, and a former lieutenant governor of Louisiana, P.S. Pinchback, who advocated for the blacks of New Orleans in the post-Reconstruction era. The founders engaged in intellectual work on activism to resist dangerous laws that they believed would further diminish blacks from their full citizenship rights. They were considered a militant and defiant group, and they had a newspaper called The Crusader. One of the founders, Rodolphe Desdunes' son, Daniel Desdunes, tested the constitutionality of the separate railway car law 3 months earlier than Plessy. He boarded a train bound for Mobile, Alabama. The court ruled that the law could not be applied past state lines. Founder Desdunes expressed the values of the group in the following statement to Judge Ferguson in 1893. No theory of white supremacy, no method of lynching, no class legislation, no undue disqualification of citizenship, no system of forced ignorance, no privileged class at the expense of others can be tolerated, and much less openly encouraged by any citizen who loves law, justice, and right. In order to implement change, laws must be challenged, and this was no different. Blacks had long suffered discrimination in the post-Reconstruction era, but had some protections under the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which affirmed the equality of all men before the law, and prohibited racial discrimination in public places and facilities such as restaurants and public transportation. Many disagreed with this act because they felt it infringed on individual choice. This act was declared unconstitutional through a series of cases known as the Civil Rights Cases of 1883. The Civil Rights Cases of 1883 started an arc of what came to be known as the Civil Rights Movement into motion when the Supreme Court in an 8-1 decision decided that the 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution did not give Congress the power to regulate the affairs of private individuals and businesses. A legal challenge would be required to change the law. Louisiana passed the Separate Railroad Car Act in 1890 that required separate but equal facilities for railways. The law required the persons directing the railways to assign passengers to the coaches or compartments set aside for the use of that race, and if a passenger refused, the railroad company was not liable for blame or damages. The railroad companies were also required to comply with the provisions and requirements or be fined no less than $100 or $500. Enter Homer Plessy. Plessy, being an activist, volunteered for his case to become a test case for the group. Plessy could have easily passed for a white man like many of the free-colored Creole of New Orleans. He was 1/8 African American, the one-drop rule. The train conductor, J.J. Dowling, asked Plessy if he was a colored man. He answered yes and was directed to go to the colored car. He refused to leave. The law stated that he would be fined $25 for the refusal and no more than 25 days in prison. He was bounced from the train, and this caused a chain of events that finally ended up in the U.S. Supreme Court in Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, codifying separate but equal doctrine in the United States. We'll get to the specifics in class with documents. But what happened to Homer Plessy? After losing his case in the U.S. Supreme Court, he pled guilty to the charge and he paid his $25 fine.